This is why Dr. Debonair is the only real expert in dating. With so many people on social media calling themselves relationship experts or relationship coaches, etc., how is anyone supposed to know whom the real experts are? There are many books that have been written on the subject, and all of the authors profess to be experts, but not all of them are experts. So how do you identify the real experts? It doesn't matter if a person wrote a book or if a person is on social media. Simply because the person says he is an expert doesn't make it so. In fact, I can tell you with 100% certainty that over 95% of all the authors of these books and all of the so-called relationship experts on YouTube and other social media platforms are definitely not experts. Oftentimes, people are captivated by the person's good looks and/or personality and sense of humor, but that does not make them an expert. It's kind of like people in the entertainment industry who have some amount of talent as an entertainer, but that doesn't mean that those individuals are educated. And it certainly doesn't mean they're an expert, yet a lot of them will get on their soapbox and speak on specialized subjects as if they are an expert, when they should not be speaking at all. So what is an expert? If a person has a bachelor's degree, does that make him an expert? The answer is no. If a person has a master's degree, does that make him an expert? The answer is no. If a person has a doctorate degree, does that make him an expert? Some of you think that having a degree makes you an expert. Some people think, well, maybe not a bachelor's, but if you have a master's, then maybe so. And then more people think, well, I don't know if a master's makes you an expert, but definitely if you have a doctorate degree that makes an expert. Well, having a doctorate degree also does not make you an expert. This is your academic credential. Now, there are some people who understand that having the degree alone does not make you an expert, but many people don't understand that. So let me break it down for you. A lot of people understand that it is the training, the formal training, which is what your academic credential represents, combined with experience that makes you an expert. Now, different people will have different opinions about how many years of experience would be required to be considered an expert. But if you say 20 years, most people, if not all people, would say that definitely makes you an expert. So what would be the minimum amount of years? I think most people would believe that having at least 10 years of experience would make you an expert. But here's the funny thing. Even if you have 30 years of experience, that does not necessarily make you an expert. And this is the reason why. Have you ever known a person, or met a person, or heard of a person who had some profession, and they've been doing their work and their trade for 30 years, but they're not very good at their job? And you wonder, how can a person have 30 years of experience, yet they're not very good at the work? The reason doesn't matter for the point that I am making right now. The point is that there are some people who have 20 or 30 years experience, but they're not very good at their craft. So they are not an expert. You see, it's not just having experience, but we must qualify that experience. You must do quality work. For some people, it takes a few years to become good at their jobs. But there's a few people who become good in a very short period of time, and then they get better and better. But the point is that it is having quality work, quality skills that you possess, and that you demonstrate through your experience over a period of years. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 30 years, or even 20 years, but it has to be over a period of years that you are consistently demonstrating quality work. So it is your training combined with a reasonable amount of years of quality work that makes you an expert. So it's not just experience, but it's the quality of the experience. If you needed surgery, would you go to a surgeon who's operated on 50 people? Or would you go to a surgeon who's operated on 400 people? If your engine needed repairs, would you go to a mechanic who's repaired 5 engines? Or would you go to a mechanic who has repaired 75 engines? So now let's turn our attention to the subject of relationships. I remember there being a guy who wrote a book on relationships, claiming to be an expert, because he had a degree in marriage and family. That's basically a counseling degree, a clinical degree. That does not make you an expert with relationships. But that is the credential that he used to say he's an expert. Now, this man at the time was about 40 years old, and he was married to his high school sweetheart, who he met when he was about 15 years old. That means they've been together for 25 years. There's a possibility he had 1 or 2 brief relationships before he met her at 15 years old, but that's only 1 or 2. So essentially, he's been with the same woman for 25 years. So how much experience with relationships does he have? He only has the one. How much experience does he have with women? He's only been with one woman for 25 years. So is he an expert on women? Is he an expert on relationships? You want to think that he might be an expert on relationships because he's managed to be with the same woman for 25 years. And that is commendable, especially in Western countries, where people don't take marriage seriously. We can definitely agree that he's not an expert on women because he hasn't been with many. But being with the same woman for 25 years does not make you an expert on relationships in general. Maybe it makes him an expert on his wife. Maybe it makes him an expert on his marriage. Some people get lucky, and they meet the right person at a young age, not from skill, just from luck. And they stay together for a long time, but that doesn't make them experts. So this guy claimed to be an expert, and he was on television going on different morning talk shows, and sometimes the show would allow audience members to ask questions. And every time someone asked him a specific question about a specific situation, he would either deflect and change his answer to something that was separate from the question, or he would give some vague, generic answer that would apply to anybody. He couldn't answer the questions with specific information because he didn't know it. How could he possibly know all these things if he's been with the same woman for 25 years? He has not dated a bunch of women, yet he wrote a book. This guy was not an expert in the least. So let me tell you why Dr. Debonair is a real expert. In the US, and any other Western country where they have the same culture for dating, if you were to survey 1,000 men, you select randomly 1,000 men, all whom are over 50 years old, and you ask each one the question, how many women have you dated in your lifetime? The average answer would probably be somewhere between 25 to 35. Is that enough women to be considered an expert on women? Of course not. But if a woman went on a date with one of those men, or any man for that matter, and asked him how many women he has dated in his lifetime, if his answer is more than 25 to 35, the woman is going to be taken aback. In her mind, she'll be thinking 25 is a lot already, but when you think about the fact, the man is over 50, then maybe 25 is not quite a lot, but it does give you pause. But if that man were to respond to the question saying 50 women, that would probably turn off a lot of women. So there's irony here because 50 women seems like a lot, but that's in the context of a date, and you trying to get to know this person. But in a separate context of trying to determine whether or not a man is an expert on women, having dated 50 women, would that be enough to be considered an expert? The answer is no. If a man had dated 100 women, would that be enough to be considered an expert? There may be some people who would say yes, or maybe. Of course, if you're on a date with a man who tells you he's dated 100 women, you probably would run away. You would be thinking immediately, oh my God, 100 women. But in the context of trying to determine expertise, while some people may think 100 women is enough to be considered an expert, most people would probably say no, not quite. And the reason would be because there are more than 100 different personalities among women. How can you be considered an expert if you have not dated all the different personalities that exist among women? At some point, the number can be high enough that if you surveyed 100 people to ask the question, how many people must a person date in order to be considered an expert? I think that once you get past maybe 200 or 300, that survey would say everyone agrees that's enough to be an expert. But how many people do you know? How many men do you know who have dated at least 300 women? That's not common at all. So what about Dr. Debonair? Are you ready for this? Because I want you to know that without any doubt, Dr. Debonair is an expert, a real expert. He is unlike all of the authors who have ever written a book on relationships. He is unlike and apart from every popular so-called relationship expert on YouTube. A lot of those people are attractive-looking people with great personalities, and they have something to offer, but they are not experts. But no one seems to question their qualifications. Dr. Debonair is unlike all of those people. This is remarkable. Dr. Debonair has dated over 2,000 women. I said that correctly. Over 2,000 women. He is your real expert. Everyone can have a different opinion about the fact that he's been with so many women. Some women may think that that is crazy. No man should be dating that many women, etc. From a moral standpoint, we can debate that. But the fact remains, when you have that much experience, you have definitely learned an enormous amount of information.
No one can learn close to that information from going to college. This is real-life experience with over 2,000 women. You cannot match that. No one on YouTube can compete with that. The purpose of this commentary is not to ridicule the fraudsters on YouTube and other social media platforms. It's merely to make a practical observation when comparing Dr. Debonair to everyone else. If you want someone with the most experience to give you advice concerning relationships, and in particular and especially dating, there is no one who can begin to come close in qualifications to Dr. Debonair. None of those people who have written books on relationships, none of those people on YouTube and other social media platforms can tell you that they have dated more than 300 people. So certainly, they don't come close to Dr. Debonair, who has dated over 2,000 women. So if you want the best source of information, if you want a real expert, if you want the real formula, the only formula that will work and guide you to successful dating to help you easily and quickly choose the right person, there is no one that can give you the information you need other than Dr. Debonair. He has the official dating formula. If you are single and still having problems trying to find the right mate, I highly recommend that you read his book, The Official Dating Formula. He guarantees that you will have success if you use his formula. And I also recommend that you watch his Official Dating Formula video series. Go to his website for more information, sign up for seminars and workshops. If you need the information, it is available.